All right, welcome to the February edition of the PED Lunch and Learn featuring a presentation of the City of Hamilton's Economic Development Action Plan. I'm excited about this presentation as it not only impacts all of us as PED staff, but as residents of Hamilton. Our presenters are Norm Schleehahn, Director of Economic Development, and Carrie Brooks-Joiner, Director of Tourism and Culture. If you have any questions, as always, please post them in the chat as we go along and we'll address them at the conclusion of the presentation. So let's get right to it. Norm and Carrie, take it away.
And thank you very much, Gord, and great to see everyone, or at least see your names virtually here. Would much rather be doing this in person, of course. Just to start off by saying I hope I'm fairly articulate today. Admittedly, I did stay up till 1:30 in the morning this morning watching the Canada-USA women's hockey game. Thank goodness it was a good result, but I'm hoping that it doesn't take away from the presentation here. So anyhow, so it's a pleasure to be here today to provide you with a brief presentation on the 2021-25 Economic Development Action Plan. It's to give you just a brief refresher, and just one second here. Our previous plan was approved by Council on December 7th of 2016, and this 5-year plan had 61 actions to move our city's economy forward. It introduced the term stretch targets into the City of Hamilton's economic development vocabulary. You'll hear more on that a little later. 85% of the actions that were completed, and 7 of the 11 stretch targets were achieved or nearly achieved. So a fairly successful document. So, which led us to, actually before I turn it over to Carrie to talk about the next piece of our strategy and moving it forward, there were 2 notable differences from the previous plan. And perhaps the first difference between this plan and the previous one was there was no pandemic when the 2016-2020 EDAP was initially presented. This plan does differ because there are recovery priorities and actions that do address our economic recovery. But secondly, and perhaps what I thought was the best difference between the 2 plans is that this was a joint effort between the Economic Development and Tourism and Culture divisions. As with the Mayor's Task Force on Economic Recovery, I had the pleasure of co-leading this project with Carrie Brooks-Joiner. And this collaboration, of course, was very important as many of the key sectors that have been impacted in the pandemic are related to tourism, hospitality, as well as Main Street business. So there are many other differences that are part of the plan, but I'm going to turn that over to Carrie to walk you through a few of those and inform you a bit more about the plan.
Thank you, Norm. So today's presentation is based on the presentation that Norm and I made to GIC a few months ago, but we have made some changes to the PowerPoint. We have added some more information about some of the specific actions that we want to highlight today, and we've added a conversation at the end of the presentation about some of the things we learned about the process and through putting the plan together that we will share as kind of the practical takeaways. So as Norm mentioned, the approach to develop this plan greatly differed from the previous. And some of the changes were quite deliberate and others were because of COVID. So the plan does take a broader corporate view to economic development, and it has a much simpler structure than the previous plan. It's also a slimmer plan. It's 40 pages, which is far less than the previous one. We also endeavored to be highly collaborative in the approach to develop the plan. First in the governance, in that it was jointly led with the 2 divisions, but also in the level and the type of internal and external engagements, and with the actions, which, as you will see, cross divisional and departmental lines. In terms of a policy and planning framework, the plan aligns with the priorities of the city's strategic plan, as represented in the pyramid image on the screen. It also aligns with the term of council priorities, and in particular, added consideration of the EDI and climate change priorities. And you will see those reflected in the actual actions of the plan. And finally, the actions cascade down through departmental, divisional plans, and into individual staff. work plans. Next slide, please, Norm. So our planning was well underway when the pandemic started, and we had to shift our focus from the planned in-person consultations to online formats, kind of midstream. But we also were able to make excellent use of other planning initiatives, documents, and engagement processes whenever possible. And such inputs that we hadn't anticipated include the Mayor's Taskforce on Economic Recovery, the Just Recovery Report, the city's COVID-19 Business Impact Survey, and many others which are represented on the screen. Now, in the early stages of the plan's development, Norm and I were quite concerned that we were going to have less engagement than we had hoped for. But in the end, we actually had more than we had even planned for pre-COVID. Next slide, please. So there was a tremendous amount of input, internal and external, and consideration of all of that input sifted down into 6 economic development priorities. The priorities address the need to have a skilled and adaptable workplace. They recognize the importance of digital. They focus on business growth and investment, recognize that we have to move both goods and people, revitalize our priority areas, and the importance of placemaking. And lastly, the opportunity to build transformational projects for the city as a legacy. The 6 priorities drive 77 actions, which are detailed in the plan, and I assure you we're going to highlight a few of them, but we are not going through all 77 today. As you can imagine, we started off with hundreds of potential actions, spreadsheets of multiple dozens of pages, and we narrowed them down based on following criteria or considerations. So actions had to be identified by either an internal or external stakeholder. They had to directly impact the advancement of Hamilton's economy, so we were looking for local results. There had to be a return on investment of dollars and staff time. They needed to build on our strengths. And wherever possible, they attract dollars from other sources, whether it's other levels of government or other partners. And the actions have to have shared and equitable benefits and support the city's climate change goals. Initiatives that we were already doing were captured separately in the plan. And I'm going to turn it over to Norm to provide an overview of the 6 priorities.
Thank you, Carrie. And yes, we'll try to keep this brief. There are 6 priorities, and as Carrie mentioned, this does differ from our presentation to council, as we are going to provide you with a list of all 77 actions. We have highlighted a few for discussion purposes, and then if you have questions, take note of some of the actions, and we can certainly perhaps address that in the time of our discussion period at the end. As Carrie mentioned, probably the most prominent one priority that came through the action plan loud and clear was about facilitating a skilled and adaptable workforce. It's definitely the most asked question and biggest concern with businesses within the city and those looking to invest here. So it's really focusing on the attracting, training, retaining, and enabling Hamilton's full participation in the local economy. And some of the key theme areas that came up, or key opportunity areas, were the following 3 points. And throughout its history, Hamilton has benefited immensely from the arrival of newcomers from all parts of the world, and these residents inject valuable skills, experiences, and ideas and capital to our local economy. And I know many of us probably around this table have family stories of ancestors immigrating to Canada and starting successful careers. But the barriers to employment engagement are much more significant today than they were back, I know, when my parents first came to Canada. So expediting the integration of newcomers in the city and the local labor force is essential to our future success, and one of the key opportunities that we saw as part of the plan. And as industries continue to change and people's careers paths evolve, individuals need to adapt and upgrade their skill sets to be successful in their current jobs. So it's critically important that our current and future labor force has both the information and means to navigate these changes. So having access to employer insights to in-demand skills and credentials, knowledge about growing sectors and labor requirements, we need to ensure that we have training programs that make this necessary capacity locally to fill that demand. And that'll be essential for the creation and maintenance of a future ready labor force. And lastly, equity, diversity, and inclusion. This work demands our collective responsibility at all levels, and we recognize that progress is underway, and we must continue in order to build an inclusive community for all. And there is growing evidence that came out through our consultation that businesses pursuing improvements in equity, diversity, and inclusion yield above average benefits. So there were 11 actions in this area, and I've highlighted a few just to basically talk about just these are some of the ones that are within the purview, I guess, of PED, and a lot of these are actually falling in within the Economic Development Division. We are home to HIPSI, the Hamilton Immigration Partnership Council, and we actually have approved and implemented the Hamilton Immigration Partnership Strategy. So actually, Action 1 in our action plan has now been completed, and well, the approval anyway, and we're in the implementation process. We've just designed and delivered our annual economic workforce and business needs survey, which will be extremely valuable as we navigate and come out of the pandemic. And we had over 1,500 responses to this survey. So we're looking at hopefully some really great data coming out of there. And perhaps one of the more significant pivots within my division is that we've actually assigned a workforce lead within our division. That's Carol Marullo. Because this workforce lead is required to basically implement what is the next point, bullet 5. We need to develop a workforce development strategy for the city of Hamilton. And when I say the city of Hamilton, I'm talking about not the corporation, but the broader community. For those of you who have had the opportunity to work with employment groups, there are a ton of employment service providers, institutions that are all trying to do, I'm not going to say the same thing, but we're not all singing from the same song sheet. So the purpose of this is really kind of a game changer in terms of taking the city's economy to the next level from a workforce perspective, is having an overarching workforce strategy where everybody understands their respective roles and responsibilities when it comes with respect to workforce development. So that's a very exciting one, and that I'm sure it's going to be taking a lot of time over the next little while, but I think it's going to be a worthwhile exercise because workforce is going to be the biggest issue that's going to be impacting our community moving forward. It used to be from the ECDEV circle that people would say, how much is your land, how much are your property taxes, how much are your development charges? The first question out of their mouth now, do you have the workforce to supply what I'm bringing to town? So a very important piece of that puzzle for sure. And then from the last action I'll highlight is just basically partnering with the workforce and business community to identify programs, work development opportunities, and initiatives that for equity-seeking groups. That came through loud and clear through our consultation that there isn't enough collaboration going on and there isn't enough knowledge of what programs are out there for those in equity-seeking groups. So that is another large part of our initiative. This is something I've highlighted. It's not something necessarily that we as ECDEV or the city will be driving exclusively, but it is one that resonated across many groups that we talked to as we put the strategy together. Enhancing digital infrastructure and services was our second priority. Carrie mentioned that there was a lot of cross collaboration with other city departments on this strategy, and certainly Cyrus Tarani, the Chief Digital Officer of the City Manager's Office, had a large part in putting this section together. And I think what the pandemic really showed, and as you'll see in the, pardon me, and our key opportunities, that bridging the digital divides related to infrastructure, equipment, access, equity, and inclusion were pretty massive. I mean, it demonstrated not all Hamiltonians have benefited equally from society's advancement into an increasingly connected and digital future. And there are still multiple barriers that exist, including geographic location, age, and income inability when it comes to equity from a digital perspective. So that is something that we're going to try to address. Cyrus has his strategies for moving that forward. I'm not going to necessarily go through but there's a lot of information here, folks. I'm not going to try and take you through every single opportunity and action, but completing a digital strategy and a broadband strategy are going to be two key components to moving this forward. Expansion of our digital Main Street partnership to support growth of those companies or businesses that have not had that digital opportunity before. And of course, increasing the number of services that can be accessed digitally online for our citizens and businesses. So a lot of this, a lot of these digital infrastructure and service upgrades will be led by the CMO's office. And just to let you know that we have these 77 actions identified. There are leads from across the corporation where it is on the city's city's area of interest that we will be I know that Carol Murillo is the workforce lead. I know that Cyrus is the lead on the complete city digital strategy. And as we move those items forward, annually we report back to council. They will be giving us a report card every year in their respective areas. The next area, this is probably the more traditional item or priority that you would see in any economic development action plan, and having been involved in every action plan or strategy since the onset of amalgamation, this has always sort of been in the forefront, has been the major piece. How do we grow business and investment? Obviously, to grow business and investment, you need all the other priorities that we're talking about today, but these are some more of the hardcore, how do we facilitate the attraction, retention, and growth of businesses in Hamilton to maintain ourselves as a leading contributor to the national and global economy. Just 1 second here. So I think what the pandemic has demonstrated is that not all sectors were treated equally. If you were in the or the manufacturing, food and beverage, life science, or e-commerce sectors, you probably didn't, life wasn't probably as bad as it was for some other areas. But that being said, if you were in a sector such as hospitality, tourism, culture, retail, they certainly have been more adversely affected. So we need to pay attention and basically, make sure we're providing the appropriate support to these various sectors to allow them to move forward. And you know what? You've probably seen mentioned in Hamilton that there's we're top 10 municipality for site selection, top 10 for foreign direct investment. We're obviously an excellent location to live, work, invest, and play. And you know what? There's always room for improvement, though. So we need to be aggressive in letting the world, and for that part, Hamiltonians, know about opportunities and ensure that businesses are excited to expand and invest here in Hamilton. And lastly, even through the pandemic, a number of businesses have told us that they need to increase their global footprint. And so we need to be a meaningful participant in the reopening and reconnecting of the global economy. So many of the actions within here are with respect to, how do we move ourselves forward in this global economy. So here are some of the ones that, and Carrie, I'm not sure if you want to speak to a couple of the ones here in terms of tourism and film, music.
Sure. So the tourism was one of the hardest hit sectors internationally in terms of COVID, and will be one of the later ones to recover. And so certainly our tourism strategy will both be a recovery as well as a building document, and that strategy is under development right now. Film, on the other hand, was a sector that we saw survive COVID very well, and Hamilton has benefited greatly from having a strong appeal to the industry, but we also put a tremendous amount of effort to being a film-friendly city, and we certainly saw benefits for that in terms of the quality and the number of productions that choose Hamilton to shoot. And as part of our ongoing development of that sector, we are looking at updating our bylaw to ensure that we are maximizing those opportunities. Music, again, a hard hit sector, and yet it's one of our core strengths in our creative community here in Hamilton. So the city does have an ongoing interest and commitment to working with the music strategy. And I think life science, I'll turn that one over to you.
Certainly, and I can certainly speak to that. Very timely, Carrie. That actually yesterday at GIC, they unanimously approved our new life science strategy that was worked on by Asma Al-Hashimi. I'm not sure if she's on the call, but great job, Asma, in presenting that to council yesterday. And that's just one of the many sector strategies that we've been working on during the pandemic. Life doesn't, as we'll talk about a little later, life doesn't stop just because you're in the pandemic. You can't put everything on hold. You have to keep on planning. So. But the other major strategy that will be coming out is this year is our advanced manufacturing sector strategy, and this is going to be a very interesting one. Although it states, specific to electrical and autonomous vehicle opportunities, there is a huge opportunity here, especially with what's going on down at that Arcelor from a climate change technology perspective. Clean tech side, this strategy will be examining all of that. So this is going to be different than any advanced manufacturing strategy that the city's done in the past. It used to be more of the, how do we get an auto plant here? How do we get, that type of thing in years past? This is more like, okay, how do we attract these high tech technology companies related to, clean technology? It's a very exciting opportunity. And as I mentioned before, we're going to be talking about developing a foreign direct investment strategy. That's on Jennifer Patterson's team's work plan for this year. And then supporting potential funding opportunities for industrial manufacturers to invest in emissions reduction technologies. And I can't say that we necessarily have been, part of that announcement. We've definitely been supportive of the announcement down at Arcelor and AMD, but there are a lot of other interesting initiatives that are following that announcement. That was the announcements, plural, that have been taking place at Arcelor for that $1.8 billion that they're investing to go to make green steel. And lastly, once again, with related to EDI, what it was during our consultation process, it became very evident that some of the efforts of what we were doing to communicate programs that the city or other province, other programs that were available for small business weren't necessarily meeting all the right audiences. We had a meeting with the group Black Owned Business, and we explained all the programs that we have at the HBC and otherwise, and they said we had no idea those programs were in existence. And you know what? It just we sort of give us a chance to pause and reflect. And you know what? Maybe the channels that we're sending our information out aren't hitting the right audiences. So there's going to be a huge consultation and push basically to ensure that the information that we have is meeting all equity seeking groups within the community. So that's going to be another large part of our initiative moving forward in growing business and investment. And moving goods and people, I mean, past strategies and plans have really talked about really goods movement and what the importance of goods movement. But I think as the pandemic has shown, and as as our city starts to evolve into one that is more people friendly and on the streets and mobility, that moving goods and people was a great one to capture a lot of these items. And it's probably fairly obvious, but I'll just walk through a few of these. And the complete streets approach can make our streets safer and more equitable for all. And complete streets are increasingly associated with more positive economic development outcomes. And I wanted to put a big shout out to Brian Hollingworth and his team for helping frame a lot of the information within this section, because it's definitely something that was a little out of the traditional economic development scope from past plans. So really appreciate the feedback. And I think what some of the other information that came forward, and probably because of the pandemic, was the role and importance of optimizing curbside space utilization that supports both business and the general public. So that's another piece that came out. The requirement, the movement of people to employment areas. This has been a challenge for a long time, as we're seeing this even more and more now, that as these businesses start to establish in our industrial business parks and all of our business parks, for the the ones that are generating the most excitement right now anyway, are located in areas where the transit service is less than optimal. So we need to basically study this, and HSR has been part of that discussion with us as we move forward in that area. We need to embrace and accommodate the continued shift toward green transportation options, including walkable streets, electric vehicles, unpowered, low-power transportation options such as bikes, scooters, and multi-occupant travel options and car sharing. So, and by improving our infrastructure to these greener alternatives, we can reduce negative impacts to single-occupant vehicles while increasing the livability of our city as an attractiveness as a place for business and people to invest and live. I mean, this is really coming back to the whole climate change piece as well, right? So these are items, a lot of the items within, I don't want to call it Brian's section, but this section really related to, you know, how can we make things more sustainable from a transportation perspective. And of course, the last piece, and we can't lose sight of it, is that Hamilton has a unique and valuable mix of 4 key transportation modes: highway, rail, marine, and air. And this is what is, you know, this is what's attracting the investments to our city, along with our highly skilled workforce. And we're increasingly being viewed as a highly viable location for investment because of these multimodal assets. And here, just I'm not sure if Brian's on the call today. Is Brian on the call today? I'm not sure if Brian is out there. I can't see everybody's name, but a couple of these top 2 items, 39 and 40, are certainly on his work plan: the curbside management as well as the truck route master plan, and I believe 42 as well from the micro mobility travel options. So I guess a lot of these are highlighted just to show that although this is an economic development action plan, not all these actions are residing within the economic development division. This is really, as Carrie mentioned in her earlier remarks, a corporate and departmental wide document. So it's not just associated with the group of people that work on the 7th floor and Lister block. And I guess the last piece that I'll highlight here in moving goods and people is the updating of the goods movement strategy. And that that's kind of on hold until we actually get the truck route master plan settled down. So we only have 2 more priorities to go through, and then I'll turn it over to Carrie to talk, because you're probably getting tired of hearing me talk about all these actions and priorities. But unless, Carrie, do you want to talk a little bit priority areas in placemaking, or?
Sure. I mean, this was probably the last area that gelled as we were developing the plan, because it was so influenced by COVID and the impact on small local businesses, our commercial areas, but also the growing trend and social trend in the interest and use of public space and the attention on the public realm. So this one really took a lot of thought as we were pulling the pieces together and kind of struggling for the words. So, but in the end, the bucket is about revitalizing priority areas for that are commercial areas. They tend to be our downtowns. This is where our BIA activities as well as other commercial areas comes into place. The recognition of the importance of downtown Hamilton, and our other downtowns in our broader community, but also our public space and place making activities. So in terms of the Sorry, no, you want to jump in?
No, you go right ahead. You keep going. Yep.
So this bucket is capturing the impacts on the Hamilton office market. And as you know, most everyone on the call today is working at home and not in an office. We know there's tremendous impact on commercial office space, and a tremendous impact on storefront and small businesses as well. The number 58 is probably one of the most exciting recommendations from my shop's point of view, and we were delighted to see council's investment in animation and placemaking with dollars for the next 2 years for a series of projects that will fall in under this bucket and further our plans goals here.
And Carrie, maybe I'll just take these last few here in terms
Please
of
do.
with respect to, number 59, obviously the deal that was made with HUPEG to transition our entertainment assets, that's going to be formally taking place this year, and final lease arrangements put in place. Re-envisioning the way we look at our lead plan, and so that's going to be from a we're looking at broadening the lead program in terms of we think the lead may be a little too specific, and quite frankly, it may be a little bit out of date in terms of its thinking. It's an older plan now, and it hasn't been updated in some time. So that's going to be another piece as we try to address some broader climate and climate change related initiatives within that plan. And then of course another piece that's going to commence at the end of this year will be the initial how do we review and update our current erase plan. So it's been 5 years on that one as well. And actually number 62 has actually been implemented through our new CIP through Judy Lamb's group. And so we've actually, some of these actions were actually already in progress when we put the plan forward last year. Interesting to note that ideally the Economic Development Action Plan probably should have been presented in the winter of 2020 going into 2021. Obviously, it was delayed a little bit by the pandemic, but I'd like to say it was actually delivered 2 months ahead of when the previous action plan was done, and as it was actually. So we're actually ahead of schedule from the previous 2016-2020 action plan. And lastly, building transformational projects. Anyone that's been in the city of Hamilton for the last couple of years and actually it's crazy what's happened during the pandemic. The number of transformational projects that are taking place that are really creating anchors in our community to build around. And you know what? We have benefited from record-breaking development over the last few years as existing businesses relocate and expand their operations. And as Tony, if Tony's on the call, he's going to know where I'm going with this. And while interest is increasing, the inventory of our employment lands is diminishing. And we're trying to pull rabbits out of the hat to make these developments happen. So it's very important that we are very strategic in the way we develop these lands and get our infrastructure and servicing in, because there are many opportunities that are knocking on Hamilton's door right now, and we're having a hard time facilitating the interest because we simply don't have the serviced and available industrial land. But there's growth enabling infrastructure that is coming. We are intensifying and optimizing our strategic business lands. And you know what? I think the most exciting part is the creation and maintenance of these new accessible public spaces that are being created down on the waterfront with Pier 8 film studios, Pier 5, 6, and 7. There's just so many huge opportunities here in the city of Hamilton that it's really happening on all fronts, whether it's down on the waterfront, it's in the downtown, in our industrial parks. There's just a lot of really exciting initiatives taking place right now. And I didn't even mention LRT or two-way go in this conversation, but those are, they aren't listed as actions in the plan because they are actually already there and happening, but they are certainly aiding in the transformation of our city. And here's just a few. Carrie, do you want to comment on the waterfall piece? Just
yes and no.
Okay. All right, we'll skip that one. So
Yeah, there's tremendous interest in Hamilton's natural assets, and we have waterfalls like nobody, and they are of interest to our residents, but they're also of interest to visitors. But it is an experience that is free. That once you have found legal parking and attend and visit our waterfalls, there is no further admission charge or monetization of that direct visit. So we are looking at options to increase the economic potential of our waterfalls in the longer term.
and while affordable housing doesn't fall directly under Planning and Economic Development, we are preparing strategies and working in conjunction with Hamilton Housing to redevelop city-owned assets with the objective of creating shovel-ready projects for affordable housing. A huge project coming out of the Planning Division is the implementation of the Bayfront strategy, which I believe is actually coming to council finally this year, which is very exciting. Talking about the Dickinson Trunk Sewer, nothing could be bigger to unlock the big piece of the puzzle up the north side of the airport right now in terms of the demand. We talked to 2 developers yesterday, and between them they had close to 6 million square feet that is just pending development, and can go that could have gone yesterday if the appropriate services were in. So I mean, that's just the reality of what's knocking on Hamilton's door right now. And then preparing and executing a master agreement with the Barton and Tiffany Studio Hub. That's another exciting project, and I'm not sure if anyone had the opportunity to go down to the open house that took place on the weekend, the fabulous studio, and a lot of exciting plans there. And stay tuned, that's coming to council within the next month or so. And again, from a climate change perspective, exploring and implementing decarbonization initiatives with local industry. You know, when we actually wrote that action, we weren't quite sure what that meant, I'll be quite honest, because like, what does that mean? And then that was actually written before ARSOR started having all their talk about their decarbonization initiative, and this has now led into conversations with many organizations with the respect to the development of a hydrogen or decarbonization hub here in Hamilton. So that action is going to be well underway, even starting this year. And then lastly, although I mentioned that the LRT was not a it is a transformational project. I think what we need to do, the action that we placed in here was really talking about trying to mitigate the impacts of the negative impacts of construction and maximizing the uplift benefits of the LRT investments. So I think we need to pay a lot of attention to that as we move forward, especially given that what's happened to our businesses during the pandemic. I guess part of it, I mean, maybe many of them have already pivoted and are able to be able to deal with this a little better, but the reality is, they're going to be there will be challenges as this gets put in. Great opportunity, but we have to make sure we're taking care of the businesses here at the same time. So I'm going to finish off by just talking about some of the stretch targets that were established as part of this. And a stretch target, we first introduced the term stretch target in our 2016 to 2020 Economic Development Action Plan. They're ambitious targets. I mean, officially, the definition they're ambitious targets that challenge current assumptions and process and inspire teams to reimagine what they never thought possible. So, and they differ from regular targets because they're just of the level of difficulty. So we're putting these out there. I find them very scary sometimes to stand up in front of council. When we stood in front of council of the 2016-2020 Economic Development Action Plan, you know what, we said we wanted to have 7 million square feet of new space. Why that was scary is that the previous 5 years we'd only had 3 million. So we were going to say we're going to double it, plus we're going to add 1 million. And guess what? We achieved that and then some in the 2020 plan. Now you may say, why did you add in any more on this plan? Well, being a little cautious in terms of just knowing that our land supply issue is what it is. We said, you know what, if we can hit 7 million again, that'll be great. Coming out of the gate last year, in 2021, we actually hit 2.6 million. Now we're going to hit 2.6 million this year? Probably not, but I think we might come close to that. So, that may have been understated coming out, but that remains to be seen. What we'll follow with that is the value of investment from a construction value perspective. Assessment gains, I got a sneak peek into some of the assessment gains from an industrial and commercial perspective, and I think we're going to do better than we have in the previous 5 or 6 years in that regard. So I think we're on our way in that area. Number 4, tripling the municipal tax assessment on the Stelco lands. Let's hope that happens, because you know what, there's a huge opportunity down there, and that's kind of tied into the Bayfront strategy. We didn't actually tie that in as an action because it's not something that we can really control ourselves, but it is definitely that is another transformational project opportunity, and very excited about that. land supply increased by 500 acres again. And for the first time, it used to be just sort of these type of monetary, how much have we grown type of thing from a business perspective. We've actually added in some people elements to the plan, our stretch targets as well, talking about increased immigration to the city by 25% by 2025, creating and maintaining a list of 1,000 living wage employers in Hamilton. That's a huge task. We're not quite sure how we're going to attack and address that. We did ask in this last business survey that we did if how many people did pay a living wage. So, and we did get a fairly decent response to that. So I think we're pretty good going out of the gate, and we will be working with the local organizations that actually deal with that, Mr. Tom Cooper, and sharing that information with his organization. So, and then just lastly, very quickly, because I know we're probably getting a little pressed for time for Q&A, measuring the storefront occupancy in the VIAs, trying to reduce downtown vacancy to pre-pandemic levels. This is the one that scares me the most. I have no idea what's going to happen downtown, and if someone does, let me know, because you know what, you're probably going to make a lot of money in terms of being a consultant. But getting a wide variety of feedback from local landlords downtown. Some say they're doing okay. Some say they've lost some major clients. Some say they've attracted a few clients. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but how it all sorts out, I think we'll be very fortunate to get back to what we were in 2019 from a downtown vacancy level. So, and Carrie, I'm not sure you want to talk about number 10 and
Just
11.
quickly, yes,
Yep.
GIC yesterday, there was tremendous support for continuing the building of the municipal accommodation tax program with some of the foundational pieces. Implementation of the tax is on hold. We do want to see a stronger recovery of the accommodation sector, but the city is moving forward with this new revenue stream that will provide, we hope, at least $1 million for tourism development. In terms of number 11, that's the same stretch target as the last plan, and much to our delight in tourism and culture, we met that target in the first 2 years and greatly surpassed it in the 5 years of the previous plan. So we've left it the same, knowing that COVID has had a tremendous negative impact on the tourism sector and the hosting of major events. Grey Cup was a good example where we saw only 50% audience capacity for that event. So if we can match the 5 from the last plan, we'll be doing great. And then I'm going to just jump to 13, which is quantifying our a target for revenue from the film industry within Hamilton. And given the growth in that industry and our strong performance, I'm pretty confident we'll be able to do that one. Now, even though the priorities and the actions and the targets are all numbered, you know, there's 6 priorities, 77 actions, 13 targets, I want to stress they are not ranked. And if there's, you know, one thing that Norm and I really learned over the process of developing this plan is that a comprehensive corporate approach is necessary for Hamilton's longer term vitality. And it's the involvement of all departments and multiple divisions and lots of staff that will make this economic development plan successful over the next few years. Another way to think about it is that everybody in the corporation, regardless of your job title, is in the economic development business. We also made commitments to council to be do ongoing communication of the results. So there will be an annual update to GIC as targets and actions are satisfied, and we will be sharing what we anticipate lots of good news through our other information channels to our stakeholders and to the public as the plan progresses. So what did we learn? This slide came out of a conversation Norman and I had yesterday about reflecting back on the process to develop this plan. And you know, the first thing that we both agreed on was that the consultation was challenging. It was all online. It was trying to talk to different people, but also using different mechanisms and different formats. So yeah, it was hard, but man, it was worth it. We got great input and lots of it, and from voices that we don't always hear from. So we had a wealth of consultation input, which made the plan all the much more rich. The plan is simpler, and we figured it was better because it was simpler. It's a much stronger narrative to be able to explain to council and to the public, and it's very clear on what the priorities are and what this plan hopes to do. The third one was, as the pandemic unrolled, Norm and I had the temptation to say, we need to delay this. We need to not do this. We need to wait until COVID is gone before we can do an economic development plan because things are just too fluid. But it quickly became apparent that we couldn't wait, that we had to move forward and turn this into both a recovery plan as well as a forward-looking positive plan on the assumption that things were going to get better. So we had to park the temptation to use COVID as an excuse not to do something and make COVID the excuse to move forward strongly and aggressively. The other thing I'd say had to tackle as being leads on the project was balancing the desire to be inclusive and democratic and make good use of the steering committee and multiple perspectives with the need to have a deliverable and meet timelines. And we were constantly discussing and going back and forth with the idea of when do we make an executive decision on content and strategy versus when do we come to consensus. And I'd say that was something that we wrestled with the entire process. We also, through multiple conversations, focused the plan more and more as we moved forward on actions and outcomes that the city had control over. So we weren't looking at, international prosperity as our outcome. We were very much focused on outcomes that the city could influence and that would happen locally. And lastly, we put a lot of effort into improving and expanding internal engagement and consultation and feedback as the plan was developed. And that paid off in spades. There was no surprises to any of our colleagues about any of the recommendation or any of the actions that are in the plan. Very often the action was wordsmithed by the lead who will be responsible for moving actions forward. And we found that there was much more buy-in corporately, internally, because of the effort we made to involve people in a very meaningful way. Norm, over to you.
That's it. We're so we're that's the presentation for today. The next step will be next time you probably hear about the plan. Of course, feel free to reach out to either Carrie, myself, or any members of our team to discuss it at any time. But we will be taking a report forward to council in June with our first update on what happened in the first year of the Economic Development Action Plan. So stay tuned for that. I think it's targeted for the first or second GIC in June. And
Thanks.
I will stop sharing my screen.
Great. Thanks, Norm and Carrie. That was really good. As a planner, always nice to see other people doing consultation. Also really reassuring to see that focus on placemaking and on that connection to housing for the workforce that you're trying so hard to attract and retain. So good to see. So I'll just be uh, providing a few of the questions that have been asked in the chat. So the first one, how is the City of Hamilton supporting and promoting new development that are building zero emissions buildings?
Wow, that's I'm not sure I have the answer to that question in particular. From like in terms of from our lead program doesn't necessarily apply, may apply partially there, but I'd say that's what we have now, and I think that's what the reason we're trying to basically expand some of the programming with respect to the lead to make it a bit of more broader program to take into account some of those zero emission pieces. I'm sorry, I can get back to you. I can confer with my team to see what else we might have there, if unless someone else has something that they have that could add to that.
No, that's okay.
No.
I think there's definitely some building design stuff that I might be able to answer, but we'll leave it. So there's another question. Which BIAs will be affected by LRT construction, and is there an approximate timing?
So, I mean, definitely the International Village will probably be the most, I guess I want to call it severely impacted, but significantly impacted in terms of they will probably go down to basically just 2 trains coming through their area, as well as the downtown BIA. And I think that may stretch out a little bit to along King Street as well. So the King Street BIA. So we're those are the main ones. Obviously, the main core of the downtown.
And any idea on the timing?
Well, is Abdul on the call? Not to put him on the spot. I do not have an idea on the timing. I've heard unofficially, within the next, construction within 2 years, but timing, I'm not sure where that's starting or ending. Abdul, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but maybe you have anything.
Oh, you did.
No, hello everyone. So we are discussing with Metrolinx. What I understand, they will be starting the early works starting end of this year, fall this year. So that early works will be under Metrolinx contract, right? So and that there will be a phase 1, which will be another utility and roadworks probably early next year, because they will need to work on the procurement documents and all those things, and then followed by a main contract, right? So this is going to be a different model which we haven't seen anywhere in Ontario, right? So they will be doing the 3 stages. One will be done by Metrolinx directly, doing the early works, which will be starting this year. Then next will be next year, doing all the road works and utility works, and the LRT works, which is going to happen probably 2024 or something like that, right? So still working with the Metrolinx on the schedule and all those things.
Sounds like it's a couple years out. So
early works will be starting the end of this year, fall this year,
okay.
Early works, right? So there will be some construction what Metrolinx is aiming for starting this year. And then the phase 2, which will be roadworks and all those things, probably next year. Then the LRT guide with the major, tracks, OCS, OMSF facilities, and all those things, that will probably happen in 2024 or something, because that needs to go through the P3 concept, right?
Sounds like the perfect subject for a future Lunch and Learn.
That's right.
Absolutely.
I'm also learning as well. It's kind of a different model what Metrolinx is aiming for, which probably is new to them as well.
Great. Well, thank you. And thanks for letting us put you on the spot, Abdul.
Oh, no problem at all.
Okay, there's another interesting question here. How often are the tax assessments done on the Stelco lands? Yearly, when property is transferred, or on another schedule?
Why am I getting all these questions?
Yeah, they're
So
they think you're the expert on everything.
I'm certainly not the expert on taxes. I do know there's there's been dialogue going back and forth with the city and Stelco and whatnot. Maybe Jason, do you have any updates on the Stelco situation from not to put you on the spot by any means, but I don't have the answer as to the status of the Stelco situation or if that's something that is even out there yet.
Plug in my headset, Norm.
Sorry about that, sir. But
no, we don't have a decision yet on there. There's been a legal fight over the reassessment. So no, I don't know what the date's going to be in terms of when that's going to get resolved.
yeah. So I wasn't sure if we could talk about the legal fight. That's why I shoved it upstairs. Thanks.
Sounds
for
like it's to be determined.
Yeah. But I do know that those lands are just severely undervalued in terms of what their assessment value was. So that in itself, if our appeal is successful, we'll see a significant uptick down there for sure, just on the value of the lands, even before the development takes place.
Okay, I think we've got one last question. We've got 3 minutes to 1 o'clock, so this will be it. Is there a consideration of land value capture from developers, especially development along the higher order transit corridors?
I don't know. Sorry, folks. I don't know the answer to that question. Is there someone from a planning perspective that could help address that?
Yes and no.
Yeah, this is a corporate-wide
Tiffany were here,
economic
she'd
action
be
plan,
able to.
so be happy to
they're all
share
adjacent.
Yeah,
They're all adjacent. Oh, Jason.
I could give it a shot. That in Ontario, the tools for land value capture aren't quite what they are in other areas. The way it's been done in sort of Ontario municipalities is you can sometimes do like a special area charge, where you might charge a special DC rate or something like that, or you might do a special property tax levy on a certain area. There hasn't been talk of doing that in the LRT corridor. I think one of the things we're going to have to figure out is, on the one hand, because there's a lot of talk about, affordable housing and inclusionary zoning, that sort of thing around the transit stations, which is also very important. But the more you kind of layer on these kinds of requirements, the more you make it more costly to build on the LRT compared to other parts of the city. And of course, our growth strategy is we want to push growth to the transit station. So there's this like kind of weird balancing of market forces that has to be done in terms of incentives and disincentives around where we're actually trying to make the growth happen.
Thanks, Jason.
So more to come also.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we're probably going to have to wrap this up. So perhaps if anyone has any further questions, if you want, feel free to send them to myself, Gord Mackey. I can pass them along and sort of go from there. But in closing, I'd like to thank Norm and Carrie for a great presentation. And also I'd like to thank Jennifer Roth, Marie Auk, and of course the entire Employee Engagement Committee. Of course, we also want to thank all of you for taking your lunch hour and sharing it with us to advance your learning. So watch your inbox for details of our next Lunch and Learn, and there will also be links to the presentation video and to the slides. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great afternoon. Again, thanks to Norm and Carrie.
Thank you for your interest.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.